go.
Hello and welcome to episode 117 of the Foundry Roundtable, the podcast exclusively covering the Foundry for Star Trek Online. I'm your tame Foundry author, Drogyn1701, and with me sitting here are two of my friends who also lost their ships in a Ferengi card game. Greendragoon and Markhawkman.
Hey, allegedly lost. Allegedly.
And the Ferengi only thinks he escaped with his life.
7 of 13 over there is going to hunt him down and get our ships back by any means necessary. But we actually have big news today, which probably many of you already know, but that's okay. It's still big news. We have a release date for Season 11, which is October 27th. A Tuesday, as big season updates are usually launched on Tuesdays. I'm not sure if that's somebody came up with that because of the Star Trek Generations joke, or if that's just a better day for them to launch those things. But we do get those on Tuesday, and the last Tuesday of the month is when we're getting Season 11.
I'm sure it's so they have enough time to deal with any problems
during the week.
The Thursday patch time.
Everybody goes home.
Honestly, it might be a mixture of the two. I mean, because, you know, if you wanted the most time you could possibly to deal with problems, you do it on Monday.
Yeah, but you want to give enough time.
But if I were them, and the choice was between Monday or Tuesday, I'd do Tuesday because it's just that joke is too good to pass up. But that's just me.
Yeah, it's a chance to finish any last-minute details on Monday.
True. But in any case, we're going to be getting the Admiralty system. We're going to be getting the revamped Cardassian arc episodes up to the old featured episode series, the 2800. That is not being touched. And we are also going to be getting 2 new episodes and a battle zone. And a couple of Q missions. That's Q-U-E-U-E, not just plain Q, is what I'm talking about there.
Overall, not a bad amount of content.
No, it's pretty good. And also, we just found out today something that I am very happy about. They are redoing the level scaling for the Delta Rising missions and the Iconian War arc. So the Delta Rising missions are going to go from, 50 to 56, 55?
And I assume this is with the intention that you can go through, if you're starting a new character, you can go through the entire story chain and not hit any...
and not really be interrupted. Yeah. And then the Iconian War arc, I'm going to pull up the blog here. Let's see. The Delta Quadrant arc will go from 50 to 56. And then the episodes of the Iconian War arc will start at 56 and go up to 59. Yeah, this provide a smoother leveling process, I think. We talked about it a lot when the thing first came out, is that we felt almost like there was 5 levels of content and not 10. And I think this is more reflective of it.
I never noticed because I get more XP from doffing than running missions.
Well, this will
yeah, and that was the problem. I mean, you had to get XP from other places to level up, especially if you were starting off at a level 50 when Delta Rising launched. You had 2 missions, and then you had to do a lot and a couple of patrols, and then you still had a lot to go to get up to the next one.
And really, this was my one complaint against Delta Rising. So at this point, I got nothing left to complain about there.
I agree, actually. Because I quite like the content that we got. I just didn't like the level scaling. So I think this is a great change. And they're also adjusting the Kobali Adventure Zone to be 52 to 54. It's got sort of 3 areas in it. The initial area will be 52, and then go to the hillside stuff, and it'll be 53, and then way up by the Vodwar base will be 54. And if you're above those levels, it'll scale you down to that, which is pretty typical from the ground adventure zones. Lots of people in our chat room talking about the Admiralty system, getting prepared for it. Obviously, I've been playing this game for 5 years. I've got a lot of C-store ships built up, so I'm going to be doing a lot of claim and dismiss that first day, and it'll probably take me into the weekend because I have so many characters. I made myself up a little checklist of all of the C-store ships that I can reclaim, all of the event store ships I can reclaim because I've earned all of those, and anything else like the easiest one to get, of course, is the Ambassador and the Kamarog, the T3 version, because you can just go play Temporal Ambassador. And even if you've played it before and dismissed that ship or something like that, or got rid of the box, you can play it again and reclaim it.
One thing that is kind of interesting there is that even if you do have the T5 one, it's actually not a particularly good ship anyways.
But there are times when you're going to want it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, everything is useful in this system.
Yeah. And that's nice.
Because low-tier ships tend to have abilities that higher-tier ships don't.
And a shorter maintenance timer.
Much shorter. I mean, like 30-minute maintenance. Yeah, that's nothing.
So there's going to be missions that, don't require a lot of the engineering, science, and tactical requirements. That you send one out on, and you're not going to want to use one of your big ships for it because it's going to take it forever to come off the cooldown.
One thing that has been mentioned about this that is currently not working properly is that maintenance is supposed to start from when the mission timer ends, not when you collect the mission. Currently, when you collect mission rewards is when the maintenance timer starts.
Well, I think there's a number of things that haven't been working properly that they've been doing iterations of on terminals. So
yes,
we'll see a number of
made several changes. One rather drastic change was all of the things that gave you bonuses to certain stats for having certain ship combinations put together. They increased all of those in one of the patches.
So something, speaking of preparation, something we should probably talk about is what authors can do to prepare for Season 11.
Mm-hmm. So there was a little confusion because I have mentioned downtime before. I don't know for a fact that there will be downtime. I'm just going off past experience that, every season update we have Foundry downtime. So that's why I'm expecting one this time. But they haven't said one way or the other. And they usually tend not to. So, a lot of people used to think, oh, I'm going to take my mission down after downtime. But that's really the thing that you don't want to do. Because you want to have your missions published, all the ones that are publishable. You want to have them published when downtime hits, because when it comes back, you want to be able to run those and see if there's anything wrong with it. Because they bring... Dragoon, why don't you go through the process of how they do a downtime?
Well, usually it starts off with the season launching, and the entire Foundry will be shut down, and a process will begin where each Foundry mission is automatically republished, at least everyone that's been published. This will go on. Sometimes it requires a restart. Sometimes there's hiccups that delay things. Eventually, though, it'll go through the repush, and we'll have a period to start testing and reporting bugs. Once that's complete, usually they will open up the editor, and we'll have an opportunity to get in and make any changes to our missions and make any fixes we need. And then eventually, once that's cleared, reviewing will be turned back on as the final step.
So throughout all this, you definitely want to leave your missions published before the Season 11 patch on the 27th, so that you can test them when they come back, and then, by playing them. And so you can see any issues that you might have, and we can find anything. Because, occasionally weird things happen. An object can get moved during a republish. We've seen it happen. If you're lucky enough not to have a spotlight, it's usually an easy fix when things come back. If you got a spotlight, you have to wait till they get taken down at some point, which sometimes is easier said than done.
And I have seen on at least one occasion a map where the terrain geometry got changed. Don't know why, but it did.
And it's worth mentioning that the missions don't all come back at once. The republish is a gradual process, and the missions will start to appear, and then more and more and more and more and more. So if you don't see one of yours right away, just keep checking back.
Occasionally, the automatic republish will fail. Sometimes this is because something's changed and it's preventing republish. A lot of times it's just some unknown reasons, and it's fine. Once editing comes back, you can republish it manually.
Now, I don't know of anything particular that's being updated in the Foundry for this particular round of patching, but one thing I do know that is probably going to appear for us is they changed and improved the Cardassian uniforms that the NPCs have. So I imagine we'll see those on our Foundry mobs and the Foundry NPCs that we have access to.
That sounds really cool, actually.
Mm-hmm. I've seen screenshots and they look better.
Also, there's no telling what sort of things that Zero snuck in.
True, I did see a tweet the other day that seemed to indicate she might be adding some more NPCs.
That's Zero. She's always tricky.
I haven't seen anything show up in patch notes yet, and Primark can tell us, but I'm not sure if we got patch notes for the latest one that went up. I think early this week, but he can tell us. He's in the chat room, so we'll wait till the delay gets to that. So let's talk about the Cardassian revamp, because they're taking quite a number of episodes and boiling it down to 4. And Pax says one of the things that he's worried about is if it's going to mess plot-wise with his Ghosts of War series. If you've got missions that are based off of Primer says we're still waiting on notes for yesterday's patch. So if you got a mission that's based on one of those old Cardassian missions, it's not going to be there anymore for it to be based off of. Some of the plot elements might be in those new missions, but definitely not word for word.
Well, this is definitely something you kind of always have to be, that you run the risk of when you do a direct sequel or base your missions directly off of cryptic content, because as we've seen in the past, things can change.
Some of the things that'll still be there, of course, is the general situation in Cardassian space is still the same, where you've got the True Way going around being nasty, but the actual Cardassians, the actual Cardassian government is pretty much allied with the Feds and the Klingons. And the Mirror Universe is still going to be making incursions. That plot will probably change somewhat, because we're going to have Mirror Lita leading them. I wonder if Mirror O'Brien's kid is still going to be in
James
there.
O'Brien?
Yeah.
I don't know. He may be gone for good.
Could be.
One thing that just occurred to me that'd be really cool is if they somehow found a way to work in the future version of I forget what her name was. Not Keiko, but their daughter.
Molly?
Molly.
Yeah, Molly. The future version of Molly they had in that one episode was amusing.
You mean the feral Molly?
That was a weird episode.
That was a weird. That was into that show like to pick on O'Brien.
And he's the best character
episode, I spent
ever.
time feeling really bad for O'Brien.
The other thing is that Horient in the chat room, the Starbase UGC chat room, was pointing out to me earlier, is that one of the interesting things about those old Cardassian missions was there was one that had stationary turrets that would shoot at you. And he was saying, okay, so that mission's probably being removed, but could we get those for the Foundry? Well, we can certainly ask.
Quote James Kirk, you can ask.
That's a little joke.
I know, humor's a difficult concept.
Yeah, it depends on your species.
So anyway, that is pretty much season 11 in a nutshell.
I was going to ask, are there any of the classic Cardassian arc missions that you're sorry to see go?
I kind of like the one where you go down to the agricultural colony.
That's the one Winanoid's mission is based off of, right?
Yeah, and I'm thinking about, what Winanoid's going to do, because he's very much based on that. And of course, as we said during the other revamps, is that, you certainly can try and recreate the mission in the Foundry if you wanted.
Yeah, it's not like we don't have a lot of those original assets.
And most of them, in fact.
I was thinking about it. Probably the mission that I am going to miss the most is the Franklin Drake mission where he recruits you into Section 31. Which I realize Franklin Drake's story has been pretty much obliterated at this point.
It has. He's not quite as prominent as he used to be.
Yeah. I don't know. I would like to see that mission redone as a new mission for the Klingon arc, so that he can get introduced early before he shows up with the
a good proper introduction. What would be good is if he had an introduction episode for each of the three factions. Doesn't have to be a big one, or you could make one that would work for each of the three factions.
Well, obviously the Klingons have a different guy as their intelligence guy.
Mm-hmm. But they do meet Franklin Drake.
They do.
Where do they meet? The Temporal Ambassador, for one. But even though that's an alternate universe version of him, it doesn't have any impact unless you have met him before.
But there's a few characters that are that way.
Sure.
But I was going to say the Klingons do meet him in the tutorial. He is their prisoner.
That's right. So he actually already has an introduction on the Klingon side. So you don't need a Klingon version of him. You might need a Romulan version of his introduction.
Yeah.
Well, for Romulans, you do get an introduction if you're a Fed Romulan, anyways.
Yeah, in the Spectres series.
I don't know. The way Temporal Ambassador falls, though, there's a lot of people in that mission that you haven't met yet.
True.
When you, because I know
Sean is in it, and Obasek is in it. If you are a Fed or a Klingon doing that, you haven't met Slamek yet. I believe Slamek is there.
True.
This is sort of the problem when they restructured some of the timelines of these missions, is that you have certain things that were, used to be callbacks to, used to be Temple Ambassador, you had known all of these characters already when you got to Temple Ambassador, but they rejiggered the timeline of things, and then not so much.
And the plus side with Temporal Ambassador, though, is that your character in this context of that story doesn't actually know any of these people, so it's not really out of context that you're meeting people you've never met.
No, it's just you then meet them later in their regular universe versions.
Yeah.
And you might say, oh, hey, I saw that guy.
Of course, your character doesn't actually remember any of that.
Pax is saying that Drake helps your Romulan Republic character infiltrate the Tal Shiar.
If you're Fed aligned. If you're Fed aligned. If you're on the Klingon KDF side, it's their intelligence guy.
Yeah. I forget what the name of the intel person they have for the KDF is, but it's not the guy from House Peg. It's someone else.
Which it would be really cool if they went back and transposed
changed
the guy
it to the guy
into
House
it.
Peg. Yeah.
No, it wouldn't.
It would be awesome. It would be so cool. I can't even remember the intelligence guy they have now.
But personally, I always thought that the intelligence person they had for that should have been an Orion, but they always used a Klingon for some weird reason.
They tend to use a lot of Klingons for KDF stuff, even though the KDF is now quite diverse. Except, did you notice in today's lore blog, there was quite a prominent appearance by an Orion first officer.
I just remember that snarky Orion doctor from the Borderscues crew.
Oh, yes. He's good.
So speaking of the lore blog, we're kind of getting maybe an indication of some of the things that will be happening in the greater Alpha and Beta Quadrant after the war, which is, a possible fracturing or straining of the Alliance, which is something that I thought might happen.
My best guess is that it's going to be political posturing more than actual fracturing.
Well, and I don't think it's going to be outright war or anything like that, but strained relations maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I can only see them taking it so far, because if they broke it enough that the storylines diverged, they would have to start developing double storylines. And I don't think they want to do that.
Double or triple.
Or triple, yeah, depending on how badly they fracture things.
Depending on how badly they wanted to do the Romulans by themselves, rather than having them go with who they're allied with.
I don't know, maybe if they did it...
I keep thinking that they're planning to introduce another faction for the next expansion, which probably won't be till next year.
Just possible. No, yeah, it will definitely be next year.
So if they are actually planning to add a fourth faction, they might start hiding things in the game before then. I mean, because you remember with the Delta Recruit thing, people started seeing Delta Recruit objectives pop up in missions before the event started.
I don't remember that part of it, but they definitely sometimes lay some of the groundwork for themselves before they actually do something. Yeah,
I can think of 2 times things like this have happened. Before the 2800 series debuted, there were no Cardassian duty officers in the game. They weren't officially released until the start of the Cardassian Dominion featured episode series. But they had apparently been added to the game code, and you could get science Cardassian duty officers at random because somehow they got added to the drop table for body armor. Anything that would spawn body armor might give you a Cardassian duty officer instead.
Yeah, Duncan Idaho says, I picked up on that. There was a DR objective showed up in Brapier before the event.
Oh, that's right, I remember that.
One that I remember someone mentioned was talking to the Guardian of Forever. But before the event started, someone mentioned on the forum that they'd done that mission where you talked to the Guardian of Forever and saw that one of the dialogue options had a Delta symbol on it.
Yeah, it was asking about Iconians. I know, obviously sometimes things leak in.
Oh yeah, we see it sometimes in the Foundry. I mean, we had that, as Duncan and I was saying in the chat room, the not cool skin got in there for a while. Possible indication that we could be seeing them in game. I don't know. You know, they don't put the featured episodes on Tribble, so we don't know what's coming exactly in there.
Also, we've had a few ships accidentally get added to the Foundry before.
Oh yeah,
being released.
The Zindi Aquatic ship, to name just one, and I believe one of the time ships. Way back when. But in any case, you know, the story is going to be going in interesting directions. You know, we've gotten out of this 5-year Iconian related arc, and we're on to something new. And who knows where it's going to lead us. But as Foundry authors, we can always key in on what Cryptic's doing at any given time, or not, as we choose. So, go ahead.
I was going to say, well, they're certainly not doing an actual exploration system. It sounds like the new missions are going to have an exploration theme to them.
Yeah. Which is good.
But boldly go where no one has gone before and shoot species that you've never heard of. Oh, that's what Kirk did, right?
Well, and you know, I always like to say that, you know, this game is not a Star Trek simulator; it's a Star Trek arcade, and so it is very heavily towards, you know, weighted towards combat, and that's how it's built.
Actually, now that you mention it, there was this one arcade game I used to play a long time ago where it was themed on Jurassic Park, and it had no options for choosing what you do. All it had was options for shooting things fast and shooting things faster, because otherwise you die.
Yeah, obviously that was not a Jurassic Park simulator in any way.
I mean, it did have a story.
Doesn't mean it wasn't fun.
And it's just that the entire point of it was, you know, you just stand there and shoot things, and the game plays the story for you.
Yeah. There was a different Jurassic Park game called Trespasser once upon a time, which essentially dumped you onto one of the islands and was almost more like a simulator of like a survival simulator. So, you know, different games are meant to do different things, and you know, this one is meant to really be very combat based. But that doesn't mean you can't tell good, fun Star Trek stories. Star Trek was always an action-adventure series, as we said.
As I like to point out to people on the forum who complain about the game having too much shooting, name an episode that didn't involve shooting.
Yeah, the not shooting was more TNG's thing. Everything else,
every
loved,
episode
shooting.
Had someone shooting someone or something in it somewhere. Even the goofy, silly episodes involved someone or something either getting shot or badly injured or something. I mean, because there's that one episode where Enterprise hits that quantum filament, and it's basically like the Poseidon Adventure in space for the episode, and they still managed to work combat into the mission. Or, well, something vaguely similar to combat anyways, because...
Well, that in itself is an action premise.
Picard and Data are crawling through it, and Data has to use his android body to short-circuit something, which of course means he gets electrocuted.
Riker Data, yeah. Picard was trapped with the kids and had to climb out.
Yeah, Picard was stuck in the turbo lift. That's right. Okay. Then. Well, you get the idea.
Yeah. It always had an action premise. the shows did, because that's what a lot of that is what makes for exciting TV. But anyway, let's move along to what we've been working on. And Dragoon told us before the show that he has actually been in the Foundry. So what have you been doing?
I have been doing things. I've actually been working on a specific map for Part 3. This map is I think I've talked about it before, is a alien refugee colony. And so I went through and started laying the foundation, and I went through and I've laid down a lot of the buildings and started building some of the larger structures. I brought along a picture to show. Got some waterfalls going on, trying to make the space interesting. It's definitely kind of a dark feeling, and I've been trying to push it towards an almost depressing feeling, because I mean, this is a refugee camp basically, and so I wanted to make it feel crowded, and I wanted it to um, I don't know if I want to say hopeless, but um, something where hope is rare.
Depressing.
Yeah, a little.
Yeah. Well, I would add lots of like campfires everywhere, people huddled around campfires, and
the first thing in Stowe that came to my mind is Fihar.
Or Hilfar?
However you pronounce it, but
yeah. I mean, because it's technically not a refugee camp, but
it's pretty close.
It's a mining camp, and it certainly looks very sort of impoverished, and
it looks like it was built by people who had nowhere better to go.
Mm-hmm. So I would add, lots of campfires, people huddled around campfires, and things like debris everywhere, as much as you can. Yeah. Make it look ramshackle and run down. Tents, use the tents.
Yeah, I haven't gotten to the stage where I'm adding in the fine detail yet. I'm just putting in all the buildings right now.
It looks very cool, I have to say.
Yeah.
Especially with that backdrop.
And I'm trying to do some of the multi-level, so you go off to the right from this picture, you go across the way and then make your way up through the building. You actually end up above where that waterfall is. I think is actually where we're going to put the beam in point. So you kind of start at a higher altitude and you can see more of the city.
So you have utilized the waterfalls quite a lot. Do you have any advice for using them? Because I was trying to use one the other day and found it quite difficult to work with.
I'm sure I do, mostly, which I don't know. I mean, it's usually stuff like coordinates and trying to figure out where I think the spawn or the origin point of the waterfalls are up at the top. You kind of got to figure out where your top is, not where your bottom is.
Yeah, and figure out how tall it is.
I haven't actually used them myself because one thing people may have not noticed is that Ocampa New Year mission I made actually incorporated a waterfall into the map.
Well, I'm not sure I noticed that.
Well, when you have that Ocampan botanical area, there's that one room that kind of like has like the pool of water on the floor. Well, if you look at the far wall, you'll see a waterfall that's kind of put there so that it looks like there's like jets of water spraying out of the wall onto the floor. One thing I noticed when I was doing that is that waterfalls are a lot like the ramp props in that when you look at it, you see a square-ish shape, and you have like the top of the waterfall is one edge of the square, and the bottom of the waterfall is the other one, and of course you need to figure out which is which whenever you're placing it.
I think one of the challenges I run into is blending the water. It's not too bad to try and blend static water planes, but the water in the waterfall is moving much faster, so I've had to come up with creative ways to cover the blending point or the crossover point, so I like put a bridge there or something like that.
Yeah, it tends to look like a straight line. I actually hid that by having the origin inside the wall and the bottom of it below the floor.
Also, DirectX in general has limits on how many transparent textures it can have on top of each other. So it gets a little weird um, when you have multiple transparent water planes or waterfalls on top of each other.
And since we're talking waterfalls, should mention that the only waterfalls we have are in the New Romulus style. So you have to use the New Romulus water with it. Otherwise, it will look weird because it'll be different colors.
That's
But
what I've been working on.
definitely a great looking map.
Yeah, it's still got a lot of work. There's a whole area off to the left that I still haven't put in the buildings for. I need to figure out. I kind of got a basic layout done in foundation blocks, but lots more work to do.
Excellent. So, Mark, you I know have been playing around with the new Iconian maps. So, why don't you tell people what you found?
Okay, well, for starters, the map is actually very nice looking and pretty much the same as the one you see in the mission, minus a few objects. One of the coolest things about it is that the objects that are like slowly moving, like the rings that have Star Trek written on them in Iconian letters, those actually are moving in the Foundry version too, and some of the floating objects will actually like bob up and down and all that great stuff. This is not a map where I would recommend building outside the normal bounds of the map, simply because of well, it wasn't made with that in mind. First thing is that it has a very low ceiling. And when I say ceiling, I mean like the actual map ceiling. Because when I was tinkering around, I noticed that one of the Iconian buildings had a sort of like a sloping side, so I decided to run up the side and hit my head on the ceiling of the map. Because it was like that thing with that one Klingon mission where if you tried climbing all the way up to the top of the hills in the map, you would hit the ceiling on the map. Just for whatever reason, they made it low. Well, this one's low too. So putting things up above the existing map will be problematic because there's a low ceiling. You can't put things up above there, and I think the highest you could put things that would actually be really useful is around 12 or so, because the actual ceiling is only a little above 15. Let's see here. Another thing is that the floating structures that are not attached to the ground and that you don't interact with in any way in the actual mission, some of those are set so that you can walk straight through them. Some of them are not. And you can't see them when you're working with the map in the editor. They're just completely invisible. You can't do anything with them at all. Which makes placing objects around them difficult simply because of the fact that you can't see what you're doing. You literally cannot see what you're doing. Let's see, other things. I actually had a crash when I was placing objects in the empty space. I'm not sure exactly what happened with that, but oh yeah, another interesting thing I noticed is that if you start building in the empty space near the top of the map and you go to the northwest part, you will see the backside of the computer core chamber where you assist Lumirin with removing the world heart from their giant Iconian computer. It does not look finished when you look at the building from the back. So if you try to build something over there, the actual base scenery is going to look weird. All the other things I mentioned. It's actually a pretty cool map in general, though. Oh yeah. Also, if you're building outside the boundaries, you pretty much can't get into the areas from outside them. You might be able to go up above the invisiwalls, but none of the tinkering I did actually went high enough to do that, and I'm not 100% sure whether or not the invisiwalls actually go all the way to the map ceiling. They might. I don't know. I do know, however, that they don't go below the map, the actual wait, actually, hold on a second. Yeah, they actually do go all the way to the floor of the map, so they might go all the way to the ceiling, too. I just remember that because at one point I fell off one of the platforms I'd placed so that I could wander around in the empty space, and ended up falling to the map floor, and then I spent time walking around on the map floor looking at the map from the underside. Some of the objects actually have a fully modeled underside. Some of them, like the big building with the computer core in it, don't. And that was one thing I noticed, that I couldn't walk under any of the stuff that you stand on in the actual mission. Yeah. Well, was there anything else I mentioned before the show that I didn't cover?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think you got it all.
Yeah, because I was trying to remember.
Well, it's useful info because, as usual, a lot of us like to color outside the lines on these maps that Cryptic gives us, and there's obviously a lot of limitations on this particular one.
Yeah, you could definitely do some interesting things with placing objects where people can see them and interact with them. It's just that you'd have to spend a lot of time and effort if you put them outside the area that you go in the mission. Also, I did not attempt to place anything inside the big building, and I can only guess as to how much. Well, Dragoon attempted to put something inside the big building, and did you ever figure out exactly what height the floor in the big building is?
No, because that was Drogyn.
Yeah, that was me, and I didn't.
Okay, so
I haven't actually gone back to look at it yet, but I will be soon because the mission that I mentioned where I want to go back to 200,000 years ago, be utilizing that map quite a lot. So I will definitely need to be figuring that out.
Wait, there's one thing I didn't mention. One thing I noticed when I fell off is, if I remember correctly, I'm not 100% sure I'm remembering this correctly, but I did a /lock, and it spit out a vertical coordinate of -75 something. So I guess that would make it so that the floor of the map is, well, somewhere around 22 or 23 meters below the zero altitude. So not only does it have a low ceiling, but it also has a pretty high floor.
Well, luckily for me, the way I'm going to utilize it is I'm going to keep to the areas that were walkable in the mission, and I'm going to retrofit them as if these other races have taken over an old Iconian city that's been abandoned, and added all their own stuff to it.
That sounds cool.
Mm-hmm. And it means I don't have to worry about all the stuff I add to it not looking like it belongs, because it sort of doesn't. So I just got to figure out what sort of areas I want to it. Like, definitely some marketplaces and some, I don't know, seedy taverns I could build on there, something like that. Sort of a government area. where you go talk to big wigs.
Oh yeah, that effect in the map that changes the lighting when you go inside the big building. That was one thing I noticed I didn't mention earlier, is that it seems to be a volume effect. So there's like a rectangular volume of the map, and whenever you're in that rectangular volume, that's when the backdrop is changed. Or not backdrop, but lighting is changed. This can happen even if you're outside the building and just happen to be close to the building.
It's similar to what we have in new ESD. Like the area we're sitting in here has, it's affected by the backdrop that you set. But if you walk over into the ops area where Admiral Quinn's office is, you go into a volume that has its own background and doesn't change with what you set on. So what you see out the windows of that ops area, so outside ESD, doesn't change. But let me tell you about some of the other things I've been working on. I have been doing some writing on a follow-up to my Iconian War mission. It was always meant to have actually two other parts. I have combined that into one extra part, so it'll be probably a bit longer than the first one was. The first one wasn't terribly long. But you're going to follow up on the Iconian attack that you survived and go through some trials with a Starfleet commander who's really not very good at being a wartime commander. And after you've finally resolved that situation, you're going to go back to the outpost that you were forced to abandon and retake it. And one of the things I've been doing is creating a whole squad of Makos that will accompany you throughout the mission. It's been kind of fun because we don't really know a lot about the structure of Mako units, so I kind of based it off of current United States Special Forces units. So I've got like I guess you call it a headquarters squad with the unit commander, who is an officer, and then you have like a staff. The rest are all non-coms. So we've got. Let me open up the script here. Okay, so you got your special operations team leader. You got a team chief. You got an operations sergeant. You got a communication sergeant, and then you have two tactical squads of 5 people each. You have an element leader, and then you have your 3 operators. You might call your shooters, and I put along with them a medical corpsman who also can shoot people, but has medical training to get people treatment in the field. And it was fun because I had to come up with let's see, there's about 14 people in one of these units that I had to come up with all of them for. And what I decided is I wanted them to all have nicknames. One of the things I'm a big history buff, and I was reading a book on like the Pacific Theater in World War II, and he said one of the weird things about that time period, especially the culture of the Marine Corps at the time, is that they all had nicknames, and you knew people only by their nickname. In some cases, your buddy you go through the entire war with, you didn't really even know their name. All you knew was their nickname, and it's something that has not been that way since. Except a few isolated places like the internet.
Well, the current U.S. military actually does do that sort of thing to a certain extent because, whenever you're talking on the radio, you never use your actual name when you're talking on the radio. So, you would use some sort of a code name, and if it's just you talking, you might use your nickname that people call you by other than your real name. Usually not, but
Well, I definitely had a lot of fun coming up with these nicknames. Usually, sometimes it's, and actually I got some advice from Thomas the Cat on this. He said, nicknames are sometimes derogatory and were given to you because of some screw up that you did or something like that. Or, somebody made fun of you for it one time and it stuck, or, crazy things like that. So I've got one of them is a Cation named Splash, because probably by one of her human compatriots who thought, oh, you're a cat. Cats don't like water. So I'm going to call you Splash. And, these are the stories of these nicknames. Will never make it into the episode. But I have created these mostly in my head usually. And it kind of informs some of their characters that you'll be seeing in the episode.
Maybe you could hide a computer console somewhere that has the information.
A pad like in the commander's barracks.
Could do something like that. I'm not sure if there'll be room for that because, the first time you interact with most of these people, it's in a situation where you are not going to be standing around wanting to know backstories. They'll be helping you escape from custody on a Federation starbase. So you're not going to want to wait around for them. This mission is mostly in the writing stage. I actually was building part of it on this show not too long ago. The episode where I showed people how to do like an escort mission around a starbase where you're escorting refugees to a starbase, that'll be part of this mission. And it's got quite a lot else to it. Hopefully it won't be too long for playtime purposes, but it will be a bit longer than the first one. The other thing, of course, that I've been working on is the Starbase UGC series, which we have posted a release date of the 18th. So this coming Sunday is when we're going to be releasing it. We're going to release all 6 parts at once instead of the staggered release that we did with Purity. So that we're going to be everything will be available to play on day one. I'm not sure at this point if we can meet that release date, so don't be surprised if it gets set back a little bit. Obviously, we don't have a ton of leeway because, of course, 2 Tuesdays from now, we very likely will not have access to the Foundry and no missions will be up. So we want to get it out before then with at least enough time for a good chunk of people to play it. And then obviously when it comes back from downtime. And we actually found out finally a name for the series. It's Photonomy. And right now I'm going to show you a screenshot. Our sort of project guru, Captain PF Dennis, authorized me to show everybody a screenshot. This will be from a map that I made. So I'm sharing my screen with Dragoon here. This is a headquarters for Starfleet Intelligence that I built. It is something that has reached the object limit because it has quite a large area around it, a landscaped area, which unfortunately by the time I got to the landscaping, I didn't have much object budget left. So it has some bushes in it, and I wish I could have done more, but this is a map that I've talked about a little bit because I mentioned that I wanted to take some inspiration from the J. Edgar Hoover building, the headquarters of the FBI.
That's a good use for one of the giant stone donuts.
Yeah. Primar, of course, has tested this particular mission, which is very useful because he found just tons and tons of holes in it where you could fall down or where you could jump over the fence, especially if you were Cation. Hopefully I fixed all those. but you know, it's always a very useful thing to find one of those people who is going to test every nook and cranny of your maps to find all the holes.
Yeah, I'll have to have Chuck look around after you publish it.
I'm sure you'll find some more things. But you know, this was a long build. It took a long time, and it's one of those things that I'm going to keep this map and I'm going to use it for other things, because it'd be a shame to only use it for just one thing in one mission. It's one on the inside, because you start on the outside and then you go to the inside of that building. And one of the things I realized is that completely without meaning it, I had built this lobby inside, and I looked at it and I was like, wait a minute, this is the lobby from the Matrix. You know, it's got the metal detectors up front, and it's got the pillars going down the side, and then I didn't do the elevator at the end of the wall, at the end of the lobby, but there is, you know, kind of a hallway leading off elsewhere. So at some point, I'm going to make a mission. I'm going to put it in a mission and have like a fight in that lobby, like in the Matrix.
One observation I made about that lobby scene in the Matrix is that the lobby seemed to be designed to be a generic thing that everyone would feel they've almost seen before, simply because of the fact that so many places look kind of like that, but not exactly like that.
But having realized that it was so reminiscent of it, I definitely want to play that up at someday. In any case, so we got 6 missions. The final one is by myself, and then we also have missions from Captain P.F. Dennis and Casmodian and Bazag and Johnny Snowball. So it'd be a great group project. We're going to really show off some map design, including stuff that we haven't shown to anybody yet. That is really fantastic. And I hope everybody will like it. I think it's a bit more of a tighter narrative than Purity was, and you know, we've learned some things since then, and we've made some new mistakes since then. So hopefully we will be able to get this out this weekend for everybody to play.
How about you? How close is your part?
Oh, it's done.
Oh, okay.
Mine's been done for a couple weeks. We were waiting on just one of the other parts to be done, and then we're ready to go. All right, so why don't we move on to discussion topics, and forgive me a moment. I have been talking for a little while. I need to take a drink of water.
Okay. So, kind of lead off. There was actually
Go
a
for it.
specific. Sorry, I was trying to cover while you were taking a drink of water.
No, go for it.
One of the topics I know we talked about earlier this week was your poll for the length of the Foundry challenges.
Yes, absolutely.
It's been up a
I
while.
wanted to gather some data about Foundry challenges and see what people liked and what they don't like. The first step, of course, is see what kind of time frame people like for Foundry challenges, and it came up with some interesting results. Let me pull up the poll here. Okay, so I gave people several options. I put 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and longer than that. Nobody voted for 2 weeks, not surprisingly, and nobody voted for longer. The most vote getter, or the highest vote getter, was 4 weeks, followed by 6, followed by 8.
Which was kind of surprising. I realize this isn't a huge sample size, but...
No. But it is a sample size of people likely to participate. So, you know, we had some good discussion about, you know, because in the official challenges, the mission would be spotlighted, and so you do want it to be a good mission because spotlights are sort of representative of what's supposed to be the best missions there are. Not universally these are the only best missions there are, but representative of that. And so need to have a certain amount of polish to them, and people need time to do that. But at the same time, my feeling is you don't want it to drag on too long, because I think people work faster if there's a deadline.
Yeah,
I know I do.
Plus,
I don't work very well at all unless I have a deadline.
If it goes on too long, we run the risk of running into the Foundry downtimes with the seasonal updates.
Yes, we do.
So
and that's why personally I voted for 6 weeks.
Yeah, I kind of figured 6 weeks is about right too. I mean, I did the 4-week challenge in last December, and it's certainly doable. I know a few people were poo-pooing that time frame, saying, "Well, you can't really build anything good in that time." As someone who takes years for Foundry missions, I can say it's certainly doable, but you have to set your expectations and your sights ahead of time. Going into this, I knew it's like, all right, I think I can build 3 maps in this time frame. So I said, okay, it's going to be a 3-map mission from the outset. I think I actually did the middle map first to kind of figure out whether what I was thinking could be doable. And from there, I expanded it backwards and forwards. But yeah, I mean, definitely setting your sights reasonably and accepting that you're going to have to focus on something. Whether that's a really good story or really good maps or really good dialogue.
Honestly, for something that's a candidate for Spotlight mission, I would really have to say that I would put maps as being third priority. Because, good maps, not a good story, still not going to get it.
And not all of your maps need to be custom builds either. You can get a lot of mileage even just out of a little modification of stock maps.
It's a matter of using maps in a way that fits the story. I mean, if all you're doing is beaming over to, say, a Federation ship to talk to the captain of the ship in person, you don't need to build a custom map for that. You can just pick one of the dozen or so Federation bridge interiors we have. Just slap your NPCs down in the map and then go. Another thing is that if you're doing costumes, it's very easy to find yourself spending hours or even days working on costumes, getting them just right. Because the Linnea costume that I made, that one actually took several hours, and I really didn't have a huge amount of time for building the entire mission.
So that's one where you could have saved some time, if you found a way to maybe use a different character than Linnea.
Well, that wasn't going to happen simply because of the premise of the mission was something I chose because of the fact that it's the Ocampan and Linnea's an Ocampan who works for Starfleet.
And I think that's something you kind of got to remember when building one of these missions, especially on a shorter timetable, is that getting the quality up to 75-80% is much faster than trying to go for that last 20%.
Yeah, see, part of the reason why I did that is because Linnea is one of those NPCs where you can easily find the NPC in the game. So I decided that I wanted to have the look exactly right, not just close to right, exactly right. And that's the reason why it took so long, because I had to go through dozens of different combinations of facial features to get one that looked exactly right instead of being almost right.
I think that's part of what Dragoon's saying when he says, choose your
Pick your battles.
pick your battles.
Well,
You wanted that
that's
to
what
be
I
a
was
centerpiece of your mission, and so you chose, okay, I want to spend time on this part of it because it is such a centerpiece of the mission as this character, so I should spend time on this. As opposed to say spending time on something that wouldn't be a centerpiece of the mission and would be less important. So in any case, this is just for informational purposes at the moment. We don't really know at this point whether Cryptic or PWE will ever be wanting to bring back the Foundry challenges. If they do, hopefully this will be good info for them. I actually went back and looked through our previous Foundry challenges and noticed a variety of time frames. We did have some that were 4 weeks. I think the very first one was 4 weeks. And talked to Brandflakes a little bit. He said the feedback was make it longer. So I think most of the rest of the ones he did were 6 weeks. And then with 2 weeks for voting each time.
Which brings it up to a nice round 2 months.
Yeah. And you can do a 2-month time frame in between Foundry maintenances. You just got to be cognizant of when those maintenances are going to be. So, if say the Foundry Roundtable were to do a challenge, which we have been certainly thinking about, a good time to start it would be right as soon as the Foundry is back in working condition after this next maintenance period. Because that'll give us the maximum amount of time probable until the next maintenance. Be the best use of the window.
So now you have actually started up a second poll related to the Foundry
I
challenges.
Have. Which I don't believe has any votes yet.
But it's good,
So,
still a good chance to plug.
Everybody go vote in it.
I thought it had 2 votes in it.
It has 4 votes, actually. So thank you for everybody who's voted so far, including yours, Mark. So the second topic is about the topic of the challenge. And we've had many different challenges, 10, I believe. And, we started out with Brandflakes posting kind of a link in the chat room for that poll. We started off with sort of narrowly defined topics where Brandflakes would write like a 3-4 sentence paragraph that you were supposed to build your mission off of. And then gradually, as the thing went on, we got sort of broader defined topics, like one that was just make a mission for shuttles and, make a mission with Tholians in it.
My personal favorite was the one where your character is exploring deep space and finds something earth-shattering, or I forget the exact way it was worded.
Yeah, it was something like that, though.
I believe the wording included the phrase that it's something so special that you can never look at the stars the same way again, or something like that.
Let's see, I can probably pull it up here.
I know what.
Yeah, description. While investigating a 1,000-year-old derelict ship, you discover something in this ancient treasure so truly wondrous that would inspire any starship officer to never look at the stars the same way again. That was from September of 2012, the Ancient Treasures Challenge. The winner was Relics by Kirkfat.
Yeah, that was actually the challenge that I wrote the Darkness Between the Stars mission for.
So the question I posed to everybody was, do you want a more narrowly defined topic or a more broadly defined topic? The narrowly defined one, is where I, or, whoever comes up with the challenge, gives you a lot of things that you have to include in it. And that there are advantages to both. That or the broadly defined topic where it just gives you, maybe a one sentence premise that doesn't define a lot of details for you. It leaves most of it up to you. And there are advantages to each one. And, the narrowly defined topic is where, most of the missions will be covering the same ground. And so it might be easier to figure out which is the best of that. But a broadly defined topic gives you more creative freedom.
Yeah. Oh, well, that one with the whole ancient ship thing, that one resulted in a very broad array of missions, even though reading the description, it doesn't sound like it would, because, there's no indication of how you get to the ship. And that's something I had a lot of fun with, because half the mission is finding the ship.
So as
Yeah, let's
much
see.
as
In that particular challenge, it gives you, okay, so you have to discover something on a derelict ship, an ancient treasure.
Yeah, and it has to be something of like monumental importance.
Yes.
In my case, I went with the revelation that an ancient race had been testing an experimental drive system near Earth, and that if their test hadn't, failed, they might have decided to colonize this part of the galaxy and taken it over.
So what were you going to say, Dragoon?
I was going to say, it kind of illustrates one of the points about this is a lot of people think that restriction is the antithesis of creativity, but I find that creativity thrives when under pressure. So I always kind of want to go for something in between. Like, I don't want it so narrowly that all that can really be done is different variations on the same thing. But at the same time, I don't want it so broad that people are just doing whatever they want. I mean, it is a challenge, so I want it to be challenging. I want to see
Yeah, I
what
mean, there
people
was
come
one
up
of them,
with when they're challenged.
and there was one of them where I sort of fell victim to that lack of restriction, which was the Tholian mission, which essentially just said make a mission about Tholians, and my mission ended up it had Tholians in it, but it was not about Tholians, and so that one maybe it could have used a few more restrictions on it.
Well, the one I did for that challenge, it wasn't really focused on Tholians either. It was more focused on the Boslik, who were working for the Tholians, because the Tholians had decided they wanted to build a secret base inside Federation territory. So they contracted the Bosliks to build the base for them, because the Federation doesn't have shoot-on-sight orders related to the Boslik. Okay, they probably don't have shoot-on-sight orders for the Tholians either, but they would be highly suspicious of Tholians inside Starfleet territory.
Well, so far, most everyone has voted for the broadly defined topics, but I want to put this poll out there for everybody and see what everybody thinks. Plus, obviously, it's a good place if you've got ideas for a great Foundry Challenge topic, post them there. I'll keep a list.
Now maybe, depending on how things go, maybe we can talk about a few.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had a few over the years. That would, I think, be fun. But in any case, obviously, at the very least, I think the Foundry Roundtable will be doing a challenge before too long. P. Sutherland on the forums graciously said he would put up some prizes to help us out on that. And I'm sure we can come up with some as well. And one thing that we would certainly love to see the PWE sponsored challenges come back. So in some way, shape, or form. So anyway, moving along, I have been working on something yesterday and today. I am going to be, for that 200,000 years ago mission, creating some alien races, which is not really something I've done before. I've mostly used canon races. So I thought to myself, what about like a step-by-step process to create an alien race from scratch? And I looked up a few online. There are a couple out there, and picked and choose a few things. And I've got a little slideshow. So Dragoon, I'm sharing my screen with you.
Okay.
We're good to go. Okay. So Google Drive has this nifty PowerPoint clone to create slideshows. So, how to create an alien race from scratch. So the first thing you want to decide, I think, is what's their role in the story going to be? Are they going to be a friendly alien race? Are they going to be an enemy? Are they going to be neutral? What is their attitude towards the player? Some of those things might contradict each other. You might have an overall friendly alien race, but you're going to have members of it that don't like the player. But obviously, what their part is in the story comes first, because otherwise, if they don't have a part in your story, then they might just be background, and you won't have to go through the rest of the steps if they're just background. You just, make a interesting looking alien and put him somewhere. But if they're going to have a central role in the story, then you're going to want to think about the following things. And the next step is, where do they come from? Do they live on one planet or several? Do they not live on a planet? Maybe they live in a flotilla of ships traveling throughout the galaxy, something like that. Or they might be a big empire of many worlds. They could have subjugated races under them, or ally races working with them. And once you've established what their home is, what is it like? If they live on one planet, is it temperate? Is it hot? Is it cold? Is it all of them? All the above, like Earth is. If they live on several planets, maybe they have one planet that's hot, one planet that's cold. Did they always live where they live now? Such as the Voth. The Voth originated on Earth. They don't live there anymore. And that is part of their history and informs their culture. What is life like on their home? Is it harsh? Is it luxurious? Is it in between somewhere? All of those things kind of inform the attitudes and the cultures that this race is going to have.
Not to mention that the race might be adapted to live in a specific type of environment.
Yes. And so you have to decide, what is this race like? What are their typical personality traits? The very first thing I think you want to do is establish the stereotype. What is the stereotypical member of this alien race like? What is their social and family structure? What is their system of government? And what other races are their friends and why? And who are their enemies and why? Maybe they're a hereditary enemy of the Klingon Empire because they live on their border and they've had skirmishes throughout time, so they always hate each other. Or maybe they're old trade partners with the Ferengi, so they have a good history there. And you want to establish, how do they talk? Do they have particular speech patterns? Do they have accents? Do they have slang terms? Do you want to throw in some of their own language that the universal translator doesn't pick up on? What's their level of technology? Obviously, this is sci-fi, so we deal a lot with technologically advanced races and some that are not. Technological level is always important to the story. So, you're taking this race, do they have warp drive is the first one. And if they don't, is it by choice? Obviously we ran into the Baku in Star Trek Insurrection that gave it up. And how do their ships stack up against the big three, Klingon, Federation, Romulan? How do their ships stack up against the player ship? Are they supposed to be more powerful? Or are they supposed to be less powerful? Are they supposed to be equals? Obviously, we might have a little trouble showing ones of greater power unless you wanted to reskin Herald mobs as your alien race. Do they have any unique technologies? We saw this in the show all the time, where, especially like in Voyager, where Voyager would be going along, they would encounter an alien race that, they might not be on their technological level in some areas, but they would have some kind of unique technology that only this race developed. And usually it was in some way that Voyager thought would benefit them, and then, hijinks ensue, and we're back to the status quo at the end of the mission. The next one is, do they have any technological weaknesses? So, are they vulnerable to any particular thing? Do they, if you use a transporter on them, does it kill them instantly? Some crazy thing like that. That could be important to your story. And, what impact has technology had on their society? There's a lot of beliefs out there that says, technology has a negative impact, and it certainly can. You might run into a race that went so far in cybernetic implants that it started to damage them, or something like that. And obviously, a big one is, what do they look like? And all of the previous things that you've decided on can inform what they look like, especially where they come from. Somebody on a hot planet, might be reptilian or anything like that. So it's take into account all of the other things that you've established in designing what they look like. And then, start creating characters. Create members of this new species. Decide how each of these characters is going to be different from each other. Decide what social standing each one is going to have. And then, earlier we decided what the stereotypical member of an alien race is going to be. So now make characters that go against that. Because that's when you get the sort of interesting characters. You get, the Klingon lawyer from Enterprise was a very interesting character because he went against the stereotypes. And then, of course, you got to name your alien race, name their government, name their characters. One of the things that, in reality, alien names would probably be as diverse as human names. But for our purposes, because you're not going to show a whole lot of them, because we can't, one of the things that you want to do is develop a naming convention. Maybe everybody in this race starts their name with the letter X or something like that. That kind of gives it that sense of continuity that, you see this name, it's from this race. And then you want to develop titles. If you're coming across a starship and a crew, does that alien race have the word captain, or do they use another word? Do they have another title? And things like that. So that's kind of a breakdown of all the things you might need to develop a race for the Foundry. Comments? Questions?
Something I tend to want to consider with new races is, especially if you're not like really far from everything, is how have this race related to the existing powers? And the bigger question is, why haven't you heard of them before?
Yeah, definitely. You got to decide, is this a race that has been around all the time and you just didn't happen to notice them? Have they been in the background this whole time? Maybe they're Federation members that just you haven't come across yet. Or, there was a great mission by Alimac where this particular alien city only appeared every 100 years or whatever it was.
Omari or something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's obviously why you never knew about them before.
Well, there actually was an episode of, I think, DS9 where there was this planet that had some sort of subspace instability that would literally make the planet disappear uh, intermittently.
And it's developing all this is kind of the same as developing a character backstory. You may not use all of it, but it will help you in writing your episode, because then you'll know all of this stuff and you won't have to develop it on the fly if you happen to need it. And if you write all of it down, then you'll have it if you want to put it as maybe some optional dialogue somewhere, or you get to a point in a story where somebody would logically tell you a little bit about the planet that they're from. Then you've got it, and you can just copy and paste it right in.
And that's kind of one of those things is you shouldn't feel like you have to use every little bit of backstory that you write. I think that can kind of be a trap where it's like, oh, well, I figured out this elaborate history. I really should include it. But at the same time, oftentimes there's value in just having a history felt versus actually explained out.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, over exposition is a bad thing.
Yeah.
Although this is one of those things where it's a great candidate for optional dialogue.
Yeah, but it's possible to even go overboard on that.
Mm-hmm.
It is. My favorite thing to do is kind of is to take this sort of lore of something and space it out. Slip bits of it into dialogue throughout the mission when it might be relevant.
Well, I mean, just as a reminder, though, as you're coming up with dialogue and whatnot and exposition, you should always be asking yourself, is this advancing the plot?
Yes. Because if it isn't necessary to advance the plot, then it isn't necessary.
So you write with your elaborate backstory in mind, but as they're actually going to explain things, you have to keep that less is more in mind.
Mm-hmm. So, for example, say you meet an alien race. At that point, you don't necessarily need to know that they have, say, a religious theocracy. You don't necessarily need to know that. Unless, say, you go to their planet and you have a meeting set up with their government for some reason or not. Then you might need to have somebody tell you, you might need somebody there to ask about what is your system of government? How does it work? I'm going to need to know this.
Well, one of the ones that I came up with was inspired by a race. Well, actually, you know what? I think this particular type of thing has been done several times in Star Trek. Now that I think about it again, because the one that I mentioned most often was from TNG, where Geordi goes to the planet Tarchanin, gets infected by some sort of parasite, which slowly turns him into this frog person thing. Well, it was also done in Voyager in a way, and also in Enterprise. But they did the whole thing of like a race that was artificially created for whatever reason. Those are kind of fun ideas to play with because of the whole sentient bioweapon angle.
In those episodes, kind of part of the point of those episodes is actually to find out more about a particular alien species, because of course one of your main characters is turning into them. And so that's one of those things where you gradually find out more and more throughout the episodes. And that's definitely something that we can do in the Foundry is, you don't have to dump all this information on the player at once. The best thing to do is spread it out so you find out more and more as it becomes relevant to the plot. And that furthers the plot more and more the more you learn.
Actually, now that I'm trying to remember if I have ever seen a Foundry mission doing that kind of plot. Obviously, you can't transform the player
Can't transform
into
the player.
but you could do another
you could
NPC.
have you could create like a junior officer on their crew, who could be doing something like that. Obviously, that's something we've seen in Star Trek plenty of times. I don't really think we could make the Tarchanin 4 aliens, but that would be pretty cool to bring them back.
Well, see, the Tarchanin aliens had two very interesting attributes. One, they had like 3 fingers, so we can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
2, they had glow-in-the-dark skin. We can't do that either. 3,
Exactly.
normally in daylight, they were invisible.
Yeah. That would be indeed a challenge.
I could do it, but although nobody else could. You need one of those special NPCs.
Invisible NPCs.
You still got yours?
Maybe somewhere. Should explain that this was something that was possible back when we had the costume import and export function. You could create an invisible NPC, however, it would crash the Foundry anytime you closed your mission.
Mine still does.
So it wasn't really great.
Yeah.
But potentially useful, though.
Should totally do a mission with invisible NPCs now.
Yeah, you could, if you still got yours. So anyway, that's some things to think about when creating an alien race. Obviously, you don't have to do all of that. You can pick and choose, and I'll make this slideshow available if anybody wants to kind of use it as a checklist.
So are we going to do a short discussion about races we've created?
Sure, if you have. I actually have not, sort of. Not to this detail. But if you have, go for it.
Well, one race that I came up with that all I did was a very, very vague story for is the Recarthur, which I envisioned them as an insectoid race, which obviously we can't do the visuals for, which is why you never actually see any of the Recarthur themselves. So instead I had them use these little oddly colored ships, and we were kind of like the Swarm from Voyager in that they like to use a bunch of small ships. But the main part of the backstory of the Recarthur is that they're an enemy of the Dominion that, the Dominion hasn't, exterminated yet for whatever reason. And also, they have a strange reaction to detecting transwarp signatures. Kind of like waving a red flag in front of a bull. So whenever they detect a transwarp signature, they just kind of like automatically make a beeline for it to recover whatever made the transwarp signature.
So did you kind of go through a lot of those different details when you were coming up with this alien race?
Obviously, I skipped several of them because I never actually created a actual visual appearance for the race. I did go through some of them though, because what is their relation to the major powers? Well, they're at war with the Dominion.
Yeah, one of the big things is figuring out, so where do they fit into the larger world of Star Trek?
And since they're not in Dominion's, they're not near the part of the Dominion that's next to the wormhole, so the Dominion is really the only major power that has ever heard of them.
Dragoon, I know you've created the Eidolon for your mission series, which are quite an interesting race, so you talk about them a little bit.
Oh, the Eidolon are basically created because I didn't want to make another mission with the Borg. I felt like the Borg were overused, and so the Eidolon was my solution. Is like, okay, something that is in that same vein of that scary, hard to fight um, as the Borg, but in a different way. So that's kind of how that came about. Um, really, I didn't. I mean, I kind of just made them as the bad guy for part one, and then about halfway through developing part two, I didn't originally plan for the captain and bridge officers to be taken over, but I found that the first part of the mission wasn't all that interesting. It was just a lot of running around the ship, and so can't recall what it was. I finally sparked the idea to have the captain. It's probably us talking about um, writing dialogue and how you should keep the tone of the dialogue very neutral for bridge officers. And I
Which,
thought
of
to
course, you
myself,
found a way around that.
like, what if I totally break that? Well, they would sound like completely different people. Could that be a good thing? And so I decided to do that, and so I started writing all of this dialogue for this very not bridge officer sounding dialogue, and most of it was just kind of coming up with, okay, they're an energy life form. Um, they're not the Borg, so they're not like automatons. So they have personalities. Well, what kind of personalities? I mean, they've obviously been doing this a lot. Um, what would it be like to be constantly body jumping like that? What kind of personality quirks would you develop?
Well, we did see a little bit of that in TNG, where there was that. That was one of those episodes where there was a giant chunk of backstory where you're like, wait a second, how did that come to be? But anyways, there was one episode of TNG where they find this planet that had been used by some race or other. I'm not sure what race, as sort of like a penal colony, but they would somehow separate a person's soul from their body and exile the person's soul to this planet without their body, which created this group of extremely angry and extremely mean, uh, I guess you could say, specters that would take over the bodies of anyone who set foot on the planet.
Yeah, this is one where they take over Troy and Data and try to hold the ship hostage. O'Brien.
It shows that even TNG didn't like O'Brien. Go pick on him.
That was the episode
where
Riker was conveniently immune because he broke his arm in a shuttle crash. Because for whatever reason, this group, if their host body was feeling pain, they would have to release their control of the body.
Not sure how that makes sense, but oh well. It wasn't important to the plot.
It makes sense because, as Primar says, O'Brien must suffer.
That probably is a kudos to Colm Meaney, the actor. Just that the writers thought, oh yeah, Colm Meaney, he can handle this suffering
he can handle
scene.
It. So, well, I for one am going to be taking all this into account when I do this ancient space mission, because some of it is already laid out for the Ikabar and the Denazians, but for the other races, I'm going to have to make it up myself, which will be fun actually, because I get to kind of decide all of the things and try and how to make them unique, how to make them have an interesting hook, as Duncan says in the chat room. So yeah, I'll report back on how that goes.
You could do something where they were the reluctant race and were pressured into attacking the Iconians, but regret it.
So some of them do kind of seem like that. because so certain of the races that you meet in ancient Iconia really seem like they were a lot meaner than the other ones.
Well, you only talked to 2 of them.
Well, 3.
3. There's that little guy whose race is not named. But, that kind of gives me a lot of freedom to figure some things out. You could have some that were really gung-ho, some that were really very hostile. Because we're almost seeing the same thing. It's going to parallel a little bit with what's going on now with the Klingon-Romulan Federation alliance. Is that, the great enemy that united us is gone. What now?
Yep. Well, another race that I came up with is something I've been discussing on Sutherland's thread, because Sutherland did that thing where it's like, okay, I want people to contribute characters to add to this story.
Sure, yeah.
So, this is also one where he wanted characters that he could kill off. So I suggested using the Luft. A long time ago, before the release of Legacy of Romulus, my Tribble Foundry character was a liberated Borg Klingon who had this random alien bridge officer with what I thought was a really cool look. So I made a screenshot of the sliders so that I could use the look of the alien later. Then during LOR, the entire Tribble server got wiped, so that disappeared along with everything else. But since I screenshotted the sliders, I was able to recreate the look of the character later on several different of my holodeck characters. Anyways, the general look of the race is kind of like almost like pink Andorians with weird ears and noses. But the backstory of the race, which I haven't actually completely finished, is the only one of the main galactic powers that's even close to familiar with them is the Klingons. But see, the Klingons only know of the existence of one member of the race, really, who then created several more members of the race to assist Klingon intelligence, and they kind of... Well, I never conclusively came up with an origin for the race other than the fact that they were an artificially created species. Their method of reproduction is what's interesting, is because, well, it's why I was mentioning the Tarchandan frog things, is because, they infect a member of another race, and the member of the other race ends up turned into a Luft. But it's also kind of like that thing from Warlord in Star Trek Voyager, where the Luft personality takes over and has the ability to, remember anything that the host body knew, which, for intelligence purposes is kind of interesting, because you grab somebody, turn them into a Luft, and then not only do you now have another intelligence operative, but it's an intelligence operative with encyclopedic knowledge of the race that you captured someone from.
So you bring up an interesting point, which is if the alien race you're creating is going to have special powers of some kind, maybe they're telepaths or like Dragoon's Eidolon, where they possess people, you should develop some kind of rules for how that all works. Say, they need, if they're telepaths, maybe they need to touch somebody to actually read their mind, or things like that. And then don't be afraid to break those rules. Dragoon, I
Geeks are
assume
smart,
that
they'll see.
you kind of came up with some kind of rules for how your possession works for the Eidolon.
Yes, they need a Thoron field in order to move outside of a body.
A
They can't
Thoron
survive.
field.
It's a big point in part one. They
Mhm.
have all these probes that spew out Thoron radiation. It keeps getting repeated, and it's basically a actually, it's a bit of a point that comes in play in part 3.
Spoilers.
Not saying.
Not saying.
But yeah, that was the rule, is that a Thoron field had to be present. So your crew isn't like randomly at risk in the middle of space by themselves. And it also was a big deal because in the first part, you find the crash starship you go on to has been trying to research a way to block it, and in part 2, you yourself are are or put up such a shielding system in your own ship to prevent. So you can basically free your crew. So yes, there were some rules there.
Good. All right, guys. Well, I think we are going to stop here for the evening. So, Dragoon, why don't you throw up our contact info?
Okay. We can be reached by email at foundryroundtable@live.com. We are always looking for suggestions for review. People who want to have their missions reviewed. We are also looking for guests. Seems often we only get to have the same pool of authors, but we're always interested in if you're a new author or interested in coming on the show, we'd welcome you. We can be reached on Twitter at Foundry Roundtab, and you can find news and posts about when our show goes live, or when we post on YouTube, as well as announcements. Drogyn can be reached at Drogyn1701. Mark can be reached at Markhawkman, and I can be reached at Greendragoon.
Thank you very much, and we will say good night.
Night.